Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Horrific Chats. In this segment, we talk to independent horror creators. Discuss. Yes, I nearly got that out. Sorry, we've been going on for half an hour. So burnt out already before we begin, but discuss their motivations and their work. Tonight, we're joined by horror author JP Behrens. All right, buddy, how are you?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
Sorry about that fluff up with the intro. Flip's sake, that's a
That's all right. Start. Take a drink of water. We got time.
Yeah, we've just been going at it here for half an hour before we even went live.
Just complaining.
So hopefully we haven't run out of everything to talk about.
I don't know. Talk about the book. Talk about whatever. I don't care.
The way this segment goes is it's just catching up. I'm not about that. I have a few questions, but just see what the conversation takes it because that's more fun. And
yeah, absolutely.
The more I can shut up and the more you can talk, it's even better for me. I can just always sleep here for an hour or so.
Yeah.
So we're just on the start. You've just released Portrait of a Nuclear Family. You want to tell the folks what the sort of premise behind the story is and how you came about creating it and how it came to be?
Sure. The story starts out with Wanda, who is a mother of two boys, married, and she's cleaning the house and discovers a dark secret that her older son is keeping. And from that point forward, she's now become obsessed with kind of maintaining the societal norms that she struggled to keep this perfect image for her family. And she confronts her older son, tries to deal with that, and everything just kind of spirals out of control from that point forward. And it's got a lot of twists and turns. It doesn't end where you think it might end. It just keeps going, and things get progressively worse as the story goes on. I came up with it mainly because I was just thinking about I think it came right when I had my first kid. And it was just a thought in my head of, I always have this kind of worst case scenario situation going through my head. Like, how would I deal with this? How would I deal with that? I have an action plan in my head for the zombie apocalypse because that's rational. And so I had this weird idea of what happens if I found this. And it kind of spiraled and went crazy. And it just became what would be a parent's worst nightmare? And then if the worst nightmare comes true, what do you do then? And then what do you do? And then keep going and then add mental illness into the mix. And it just goes crazy at that point. So that was really the inspiration behind the book, and me just kind of going wild with it and just trying to keep going, saying, how can I make this worse? Mm-hmm. All right. And get to that point. All right. How can I make this even worse? And just keep going until I got to a point where I'm like, yeah, I've pretty much gone as far as I'm personally willing to go on this story.
Is there a point? One thing I've noticed about horror creators, there always seems to be this need to apologize for liking the darkness and the macabre and for wanting to create it. I don't know where it comes from. And you mentioned about societal norms. Is that a thing that's, oh dear, people's going to think I'm actually an absolute lunatic, or people aren't going to invite me to dinner anymore? What is it about people feel like they have to apologize? I just embrace it because I think I'm more rational than the person trying to be the nice person, because they're the ones that climb up the bell tower and do gnarly stuff. They're the ones that snap, whereas I just laugh and go,
Yeah, so my wife will be talking to coworkers and stuff because she's really happy. Oh, you got a book out. That's great. You've been working at this for a really long time. And when people ask what it's about, she's kind of I don't know what to say. So honestly, the way I look at it is for a good example for this book is I personally think I personally don't really like trigger warnings or content warnings.
Oh no.
I'm not a big fan of them. However, for this book, I specifically said this book needs a content warning because whereas I don't like them in general, I do see a place for them. I've got a friend who has serious issues with anything that has animal cruelty in it and will not read anything that has an animal get hurt. My book, Animals Get Hurt. So I said, listen, trigger warning for animal cruelty, for graphic depictions of animal cruelty and depictions of mental health, mental abuse, physical abuse, and emotional abuse. Really quick stuff you would normally find in a horror novel. But in this book, it's pretty graphic and it's pretty nonstop, keeps punching in the face as you're reading it. I want people to go into it prepared. And the reason I put it in there was, one, I don't want a bunch of people who would immediately 1-star review a book because an animal gets hurt in it to pick it up. I want you to see in the warning right at the shot, this is a book not for you. Don't read it. 1-star review. Don't read it and 1-star review it. This is not aimed at you. You're not the demographic. But this is an extreme horror novel, so that's the reason behind it.
I find out, like personally, if you're in the horror genre, because you see a lot of this in social media, you see people like buying the plushies and what do you call them, the Funko Pops and all that kind of stuff. They like sharing the memes.
Whole wall of them.
Oh yeah. But you've got these people, they like to play the part of being a horror fan, but they're always the first to report people, to cause trouble, to get upset. And you kind of wonder, what are you doing in this space? The horror genre is all about, not just about being frightened, because once you're kind of a veteran in the horror genre, you don't get frightened anymore.
No.
I always say it's
really
more
hard
about
to scare people.
Yeah. You know what I mean? You're laughing more at times, you're watching people getting chopped to bits, and you're like, and you're seeing if it's a good kill or not. No, your brain does get slightly warped, but it could be that anyway.
Yeah, you develop a very keen sense of Schadenfreude, where you're just like...
And I say horror is now more about the uncomfortable feeling. I don't like animal cruelty. I don't like stuff, but I've read and performed loads of books with animal cruelty. I've watched movies with it, and as I was thinking, oh shit, they killed the dog. Why'd you kill the dog?
Right, but there are people like that.
But I'm not gonna like completely pan a movie, because that's part of it. It's the same as like there's very few movies. One of the ones that, the Fear Street series I put on Netflix not so long ago.
Yeah.
One of the first movies actually brave enough to massacre a bunch of children.
Yeah.
And that would normally be no, don't do it, but it works, because so many times, because people have become so fragile, you're seeing people playing it safe and doing stuff off camera, or they're trying to water down the horror genre, and that's not what it's about.
I think
I've got concerns.
Yeah, I think anything, any art, any sort of genre, fantasy, horror, literary, all of it. There are many various levels of it, from here's extreme blood splatter, splatterpunk, to the lighter type stuff that has no gore in it but is psychological, like Session 9. And it's so varied, and there's just so many differences between all the different things that obviously there's not something that's going to be good for everybody, but there's something for everybody. Even if you don't like horror, you might like campy horror, like Student Bodies. And you might like really...
the House series, there's a classic example of campy horror.
Yeah.
It's no real gore on it.
I mean, technically,
80s classic, yeah.
Technically, Supernatural is a horror show. It was in the beginning, but it was a network horror show. You could watch it, get a couple thrills, a little bit of jump scares, maybe, for the first season, but that was for like the lower end group. And then you've got the extremists who are,
that's the shallow end. You're not quite in the diving pool yet. That's a baby pool. You can put your armbands on.
So like Portrait isn't for Supernatural, wading pool people. This is for more of the deeper end. You're going to be able to manage some psychological attacks and some pretty really rough descriptions of some things, We
could be onto something here.
What's that?
Right. So instead of trigger warnings, and we just have a picture of a pool filled with blood, right?
I'm down.
And then you're like, okay, here's the kiddie pool, and put your boot there. Here's the sort of medium swimmers just starting, and here's the experts, and here's the the diving pools where you're ready to go. And
I mean, dude, like, just
you could slide your boot,
put it up every time you do something. This is for the deep end, guys. And at the very, very far end is just the ocean with Jaws sitting there.
Yeah, that would be to me that'd be more. That's more of a horror sort of, right? Okay, you're now here.
Yeah, but I mean, but that's pretty roughly like almost every genre. You got the fantasy section, which you got urban fantasy, and then you got high fantasy. And some people are going to really like urban fantasy, but wait a minute, high fantasy? No, I don't need all those elves and stuff. But urban fantasy with a little bit of magic, all the way down to like magical realism with one little thing. Everything's so different for everybody that I don't mind having a trigger warning or a content warning for a very specific issue that I think personally is going to affect people. But for having a trigger warning for literally everything, I think is going a little overboard. And I think any good thing taken too far makes it a bad thing. And then it just kind of messes it muddies the water entirely.
And that's what I'm worried about. The whole corporate blandness, when you've got one or two companies own everything creatively, everything's just becoming generic. Like I watched a movie there during the week, Blood in the Sky.
Okay.
And I genuinely couldn't tell if it was a vampire movie or a zombie movie. Because it's got that point, they're meshing the genres and they've lost their distinctiveness, and it's just, conveyor belt, here's the next monster,
Well,
that's what I'm worried.
I mean, you can look at mainstream, like I Am Legend with Will Smith did that. You couldn't tell, they were supposed to be vampires, like actually a society of vampires.
Yeah.
And instead it was this weird zombie thing. Zombie vampire type thing. Yeah.
Only thing I can say is, thank goodness they didn't put the alternative ending in the. Did you ever see that?
Which one?
The alternative ending.
Oh yes, I did. I watched. I think I rented it and watched it. Yeah.
Oh God,
that was pretty rough.
I was like, what are you doing? Who thought that was a good idea?
I mean, that whole movie kind of did not follow the book at all.
No, but that's why we have, as horror creators, we've got to remind people this is horror. It's not fluffy. It's not nice.
Oh yeah, no.
You're not coming in. You can have a good time, but you're not coming in here to be mollycoddled.
Yeah.
We'll let you. You can start off in the baby pool, but understand we expect you to swim or get out.
Well, I think a lot of people. I think a lot of people mistake, like they think horror and for good reason. Everyone immediately, their brain goes to Stephen King. These the main horror guys, been there forever. And Dean Koontz, another one who you like. You go to a horror section in a bookstore, good 30% of it is those two, if not more. And when you read their books, they're not in any way. They're not like extreme. Not, at least most of them aren't. I just recently finished reading Salem's Lot, and Salem's Lot is, for all intents and purposes, it's a pretty straightforward vampire story, but it's not really bloody, it's not really gory, it's kind of creepy at points, and that's about
more the idea behind it,
right. It's more the idea and the stuff you're not seeing that's like, oh man, that's wild. And I think people are taking that and going, that's horror. But then when they're faced with something that's way more graphic or way more involved, they kind of throw their hands up and go, oh my God, that's too much. And it's like, well, no, one is more mainstream. The other this is more like what the horror community is putting out. It's more like it kind of is a more throwback to the graphic comic books, Tales from the Crypt comic books that were pretty graphic for what they were, because you had the pictures and
still a lot of fun.
Red blood and everything.
Even still remember Creepshow 2 from back in the day. That was still, the scene. What do you call that one? The one in the pond with the tar monster. Like I watched that as a kid, and that still sticks with me today. That's one of the ones that sticks in my brain. Oh yeah, it's about in there, and you're
the
like,
pond, absolutely. It still like messes my head up. Yeah. If I go to like a local pond and there's a big wooden raft in the middle, and people are
watching the birds.
I'm like,
no. I'm like, right? Are you getting back out again? Okay,
not going out there. No,
but that's great. In fact, I'm on a horror app called Slasher. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
No,
it's a recent app just been created, purely for horror fans. I want to get the actual creator on here maybe in October, because September's booked up. But I want to maybe get the creator on and talk about it, because social media in general is horrendous for horror fans now. They're banning, they're complaining, they're trying to bring all the crap from other franchises, which I don't want in here. But a topic of conversation came up just on what you're talking about. They're talking about both well-known, long-standing horror franchises, and the guy that made the post was complaining that Leatherface wasn't as well-known or wasn't as high up the ladder as the likes of Freddy and Jason.
Okay.
And I said, well, when the movie came out, it was banned, it was shocking, and it took people over a decade to revisit a Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And plus, Leatherface wasn't the main character, it was the family. the cannibal family, you know, was the main character, but
Yep.
just with that shock value that people were expecting, like Friday the 13th is a straight up slasher movie, you know.
Yeah.
In fact, it's blood red paint, you know, you can have a laugh.
Well,
Nightmare on Elm Street, straight up, people know what they're getting. But
yeah,
when they
well,
went to
so
watch
like
Texas Chainsaw Massacre
was treated. I mean, when he filmed it, it was treated like a documentary.
Mhm.
It was treated like this is real. Versus, I can't. I'd have to look at the dates because I can't remember. But like
1970.
yeah, so I'm like trying to think like how many
6?
Friday the 13th has come out. If the first one had come out, that was kind of almost like a mystery slasher. If we're talking about the first one,
Yeah.
you didn't get Jason until the second movie, and even that was still kind of like a still like a
it was part 4 until he actually put on the hockey
right.
mask and
It's
became,
not until part 4 that he
character.
starts getting crazy, and like now they're just trying to kill people in the most creative possible ways they can think of. And Friday the 13th was
people know
very
they're
much like fantasy horror,
yeah,
where just the rules didn't exist anytime you fell asleep, and it was just wild. And it was still fantasy. It was still out there and just weird. Versus Texas Chainsaw Massacre was way too realistic. It was like, this could happen.
Yeah, people didn't come back to it for a decade.
Yeah.
You know,
and people were freaked. And I get it. You've never seen anything like that before. It was right up there when the first time a movie was ever projected and it was a train or somebody, like there was a cowboy shot into the screen. People freaked the hell out because they thought there was some giant cowboy shooting them out of the movie. Because it was just so weird to them.
Alfred Hitchcock's The Tingler, if you remember that, they'd actually put electrodes on the seats.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they were messing about that there, and the like proper. God, was that 1956 or something? You know, even back then.
Yeah.
They're making movies like that. Oh, by the way, anyone correct me? I'm trying not to be. I'm only pulling these dates out of the top of my head. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Do apologize and. Put in the chat the correct date if you want. But
yeah, but
they were messing with electrodes.
I remember hearing stories about that. Yeah, which was that's such a cool idea. I wish like theaters would do that now. But
that's what horror was about. It was about freaking people out and taking you out of your safe space. I hate that term, but you know what I mean. It's taking you out of your comfort zone, putting you into another world where you don't know what's going to hit you. And I'm just concerned. Because we see the other franchises, you mentioned fantasy, we see flipping, they're all at each other's throats. Sci-fi, they're all at each other's throats.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want that to happen to horror. The horror franchise has always been in the limb, has went on for so long without, and there's always been blips here and there, because where there's people, there's always drama.
Oh, yeah, let's say there's been drama.
Horror has not had that level of toxicity that other franchises have.
Yeah, anytime there's some kind of thing that pops up like that in horror, it gets managed almost immediately.
Well, we're seeing it with Hellraiser, the new Hellraiser series.
Yeah, the new Hellraiser. Yeah, they recast Pinhead as
Jamie Clayton.
as a woman, but they're gonna make Pinhead more androgynous, like he was in the books. Yes, so I'm fine with it. I'm like, eh. And anyone who's flipping out about that, I'm like, who cares? It's a demon from hell. It's not that important.
I was just about it was a bit strange them actually bringing, and now I know it was going on for about 2 years before Clive Barker got the rights back and became involved.
Yeah.
But Clive Barker effectively retired Pinhead.
Yeah.
In the Scarlet Gospels.
Yeah.
He dropped hell on him. He finished him off. And he actually, that book was so full of venom and hatred towards the nickname Pinhead. And you could just feel the bitterness towards the studio for the mess with this product that he was just like, fuck you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, he's never been.
And it was just strange that they're actually bringing Pinhead back. But have you seen the new stills that have been put out?
I saw one
and
of
the mask.
Yeah, I saw her with the pins and everything and the bald
head.
Yeah,
and she's got like almost a piece of the Lament configuration embedded. So she's almost like a combination between the Pinhead Cenobite and the other one, the female one in the first movie with her throat.
Yep.
So they've almost amalgamated those two. But what they've done is they've got it looks, because you can't really tell from a still, but it looks almost as if she's got a piece of the Lament configuration in her throat. Okay. And I'm wondering, is she going to have almost like a clockwork voice, or is there going to be a mechanical thing? No, I mean, that's why my brain's going.
That'd be cool. Well, I'd be down.
That franchise is people, and I haven't seen it. I've only heard that people are saying, but I haven't seen like the stupid arguments that are going on in other franchises.
Give it time.
People still expect Doug Bradley, and what's he now? He's in his 60s.
Well, you know what?
To sit in the makeup chair for 6 hours, do those scenes. It's like, let the man bloody retire. It's the same with Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, yeah.
Let Robert Englund's hitting 70.
Yeah.
He already spoke in his 30s and 40s how stressful it was to sit in a chair for 6 hours to get the latex.
That stuff is crazy. Yeah.
So that's stressful. And then that's stuff that you can't breathe. You know what I mean? You're
right.
If you've ever worn a helmet or a face mask or done anything for any length of time, you're, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the people that are complaining maybe haven't experienced that or haven't had any level of discomfort in their life. But
I think it's people are like, you know, oh, we're purists and we just want it to be the way it was when we were younger or the first time we experienced it. And I'm like, that just isn't how anything works. The way I've always gone into stuff, like people will be like, oh, the book's better than the movie or the movie's better than the book or whatever, whichever way they want to argue. And I'm always like, the book is the book. The movie's the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Experience them separately. Don't read a book and then go watch the movie and be like, oh, you messed it all up. Like, no, read the book, enjoy the book for what it is, then go see the movie. If it's a good movie, who cares? Have fun with the movie. The Shining is an amazing movie. Mm-hmm. It is also an amazing book. They are completely devoid of one, like divorced of one another for the most part.
It wasn't until Dr. Sleep that they brought in the motivation behind the entity, you know.
Yeah.
And what was actually causing, you know, what was causing the events or why they were after Danny in the first place. And that's fine because the movie didn't need to do that.
But it was just like the fact that people like, but it's like, it's very much that, like, you know, when Stephen King's like, I don't like the Shining movie, I get it. It's not your book. It's not what you signed on for.
Mm-hmm.
But he also says, but it's still a good movie. It's just not my book. And I go, that's the perfect way to look at it. I have no problem with adaptations. Like the Lord of the Rings thing. People were complaining about the new Lord of the Rings the minute they started having like trailers for it. So I have no doubt that the minute they put trailers out, the minute they put trailers out for whatchamacallit, well, the minute they start putting trailers out for the new Hellraiser series, I have no doubt in my mind there will be a group of people flipping out about it. Because that's that's just what happens online.
But as long as there's respect, I think the difference with Lord of the Rings and that they're the level of spite in the creation of that, and it seemed to be a requirement to be an actor in that series. You have to be in a massive bell end because every one of them actors in their mouth are absolute choppers, and you're like, oh, you're a dick, get out of my face! I'm not watching anything you're in, freaking arsehole. And that's not really the way to endear people, you know.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't generally watch any of the making of stuff. I don't watch interviews. I just wait for the show to turn on and I go, I'll watch that now. And I just go in
as well because
I go in blind.
It was bad. And it's the same with like I said, the other franchises. When you call your customers names just to go, oh, well, if it's bad and you don't like it, it's because you're a bad person, an evil entity. It's like, that's off.
Yeah, I don't even listen to that stuff.
Yeah,
I avoid all of it.
To
I stay out of those conversations.
But to me, you should pay attention because if that's what the person creating things thinks, then okay, well, maybe you don't need my money. Maybe I'll give my money to independent creators instead.
Oh, granted. Well, you know, there's the thing.
Do you know what I mean? That's why this show's all about pushing independent creators. They're out of that nonsense because
there's
with a long conversation before this went live.
Content out there that you know, because I was telling you before the show started, I really don't watch television. I really don't watch movies that anymore. I don't really have the time for it. I'm usually sitting in front of my computer, reading a book, or you know, doing Tai Chi or something, just trying to exercise something. Mm-hmm. And I don't really have time to sit back and I don't really have a couple hours to sit and watch anything. It took me almost a week to watch the Snyder cut of the DC of the Superman or the Justice League.
Oh yeah,
because I had to watch it in like 15-minute, 20-minute, like you know, little chunks because I just didn't have the time to sit down and watch even an hour of it. I watch shows while I'm eating lunch. That's about the only time I watch television. But I don't mind giving my time to larger franchises, but also I think it is important to keep an eye on the smaller independent groups because indie people are going to do crazy stuff that is going to be innovative and not necessary, and definitely not mainstream. And you're going to get exposed to a lot of really cool stuff that nobody's willing to take a chance on. Whereas, you know, like Amazon's not going to put anything out experimental. The closest I think anyone got to that was Devs. And that was because it was being backed by a director who had chops. He did, you know, he did Machinima, he did
Ex Machina,
Ex Machina,
yeah.
and did Annihilation by that point. So Devs was kind of a controlled experiment.
What's his name?
Oh, it's Alex
Kurtzman. No, it's not Kurtzman. He's the one with the Star Trek. Oh my god, I forget. Yeah, he did something. He actually did a horror movie recently there as well, and I can't bloody remember.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, we're professional on this show, folks. Just fountain of knowledge here. Problem is, there's not much stuff out there. It is hard.
It's too much to remember on any given day. Yeah.
But as you as a creator, you've mentioned, you know, I mean, people automatically go to the mainstream to think, what's the challenges for you as an independent creator to try and navigate all of this? Because it's really hard. It's easy in one sense to get your voice out there, but it's also really difficult.
In the end, I think ultimately, even if you're doing something experimental, even if you're doing something non-mainstream or extreme or what have you, ultimately the key to anything is to do it well. You guys, Jack Ketchum, who passed away a couple years back. There's a story. I go to this convention, or I try to go to this convention in New England called Nikon, and he was always there. He was there often, and they love people to love telling stories about him because he was a fun guy. And there was a story about somebody who went there and met with him and was talking to him and said, "Yeah, I'm trying to get this book out, blah blah blah. It's a kid's book." And Jack Ketchum said, "Send it to me." And the guy's like, "Well, it's a kid's book. It's not necessarily something that you write. It's definitely not anything that you would normally, you know, it's not your genre." And Jack Ketchum looked at him and said, "Dude, doesn't matter. Good writing is good writing. Send it to me." And I very much believe the same. I latched onto that like immediately and was like, that's the truth. Good writing is good writing. Even if you're writing crazy, extreme, wild nonsense, if it's a well-written story, it's still going to resonate. The content may not resonate, but at least the writing does. And I think that's an important thing for any creator to think about, because you may be writing extreme horror now, but in 5 years' time, you may get the itch to write something completely different that maybe is mainstream. And being in the habit of writing good, just writing well and writing good work and producing good work, that will help you. And that'll give you the confidence to say, you know, I have no problem switching genres because good writing is good writing. That's it. But I think you froze. So hi.
Yeah, so I think you find most people are fans of writing. They don't just stick.
All right. So while Colin is resetting, hopefully he'll be back soon. One thing I want to talk about is so like, but yeah, one of the things I think everybody should do, especially if you're a starting writer, is
to be losing
read a lot. Oh, hey, you're back.
I'm saying, kicked out of my own show. How's that?
I don't know. I was trying to carry on without you when I realized what was going on.
What's that? I don't know what happened there. I was like, oh, bloody hell. StreamYard just went
for a second, and I was like, no, he's gone again.
All right, now hopefully that doesn't happen.
But yeah, like I said, good writing is good writing. That's what people need to focus on.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter how good you are, how much heart. It's still a tricky thing to get known, get recognized.
Oh, it's dumb luck. A lot of it's luck. There are brilliant writers out there that nobody knows who they are. It happens way too often. It is a lot of dumb luck. There's no way around that. It's a sad fact, but I don't think you don't go into writing, or you shouldn't go into writing thinking I'm going to be super successful. you go into writing mainly because you really can't think of anything better to do with your time. I have tried to do a bunch of different things, and the only two things I've ever actually enjoyed doing that have made me moderately happy are writing and teaching kung fu. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
They're the only two things that I've ever done for money and teaching writing. The only two things I've ever done for money that I was like, I don't mind doing this. But I've had numerous other jobs, and I came home miserable to the point where my wife was like, stop going to work, stay home, take care of the kids, take care of the house, and write, because you're insane when you're not doing those things, and I can't manage it. And I was like, okay. So now I'm a much happier person. I don't make a lot of money, but we pay our bills. My family's happy, and I like what I do.
Do you think people maybe get too wrapped up in that? Unless you're viral, unless you're like top of the pyramid, at the pinnacle, it's not worth doing. Do you think there's that sort of mindset when people
Yeah.
comes to
Yeah, and I
they've
think
kind of lost their way in terms of being a creator with having a vision and wanting to actually put something out there or put it together. But
yeah, I
the
think
trappings of
people.
success.
Yeah, so I think people, what happens is, especially I had this problem. I had to get off social media for like a year because of this. You get on there, and as you're doing this, you start going to conventions, and you start meeting other writers, and you start talking to other people. And then those people that you meet and talk to and become friends with, you friend them on Facebook, and then all of a sudden you see on Facebook that, oh, hey, I published this book. Oh, hey, my book did this. Oh, hey, I just got an agent. And meanwhile, you're still plugging away, trying to get anything sold. And the whole time you're watching these people be successful, and you're just still going typing and not getting anywhere. And yeah, it can become incredibly frustrating because you're like, why can't I get my stuff picked up?
Yeah, why can't I get my slice of the
Right.
pie? Or what am I doing wrong?
And a lot of
Self-doubt
the
comes
time,
in.
it's just the stuff you like. For me, I know one of the big problems I have is that my stories are batshit crazy. I everything I do basically covers one, two, or even three genres that I just smashed together and said, hey, that sounds interesting. I don't think I've ever done anything that's straightforward, because a straightforward story to me is not interesting to write.
Mm-hmm.
I love reading them. I just can't. When I try to write them, I get bored too quickly. So I have to take in all these other like strings, tie them together, and make this weird multicolored knot of crazy that everyone's like, I have no idea what to do with this. Like this, I like it. It's well written, but I don't know how to sell this. I've been told that a couple times on my first novel. I like it. I don't know how to sell it. And I'm like, okay, that's fair. Get it. And then I move on, and then keep going and write another book, write another story, and just keep going. And I think one thing, if you're really getting frustrated and thinking, why is this taking me so long? I strongly suggest look at stories of successful authors. A lot of them took forever to get to where they are. There are numerous authors that you'll hear stories that be like, I was writing for 20 years, and then I published this book, and overnight, now I can publish anything I want to publish. Like I just write stories, and they just come flying out, and everybody buys everything I write. But it took me 20 years of toil in a basement or in my office or in a closet to get to that point. But over that 20 years, you created 20 years of content that now that people have noticed you and maybe you have a foot in the door, you can go back and revisit. One, I guarantee you're going to be like, oh my God, this was horrible 20 years ago. I can rewrite this better now. And two, people will be more inclined to look at the work, because whether you noticed it or not, over those 20 years, you were getting better. Every single day you sat down in front of the computer and typed. So you have to look at it. So I'm maybe 15, 20 years into this, and I can look at stuff I wrote 20 years ago, and I read it and go, dear Lord, what was I thinking?
Yeah, what was it? Yeah.
I
try to say to people, spending time creating is not time wasted.
Right.
But it's about the mindset.
You have to have, it's not an easy mindset. I still get discouraged. There are mornings where I wake up and just go, no. But it's a job. I go downstairs, I sit and I do my stuff. I get all my nonsense done in the morning that needs to get done. After lunch, I go in the basement where my office is, and I sit in front of the computer and I start typing. Like right now, I'm working on a rewrite. I hate rewriting. Rewriting is like 90% of this job, and I can't stand rewriting. But I do it because this is the job I want to do. I want to create stories. I want to write cool stories. I want to tell them to people, and I want you to enjoy them. And that's it, you know? So you got to do it you can't do it for the money, because the money is there are some really successful genre authors who still, while their name is known, they make just enough to pay their bills. They're not rolling in cash. You know, it's a weird industry. If you're going to be in it, be prepared for the crazy.
Yeah. And especially, because it takes so long, it's not like something you churn out in a month. You know, writing takes a long time.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe people don't appreciate that it just takes, you know, you can spend 10 years on one story, or you can spend a year.
Yeah.
There's one of our authors, Dale, she normally pops in the chat, but she pops out stories all the time. And I'm like, bloody hell, I'm sweating here trying to just do a paragraph. And you're like, here's another wee short story for it. Here's another short story. I'm like, bloody hell, you're brilliant, you know.
Yeah, I'm jealous of those people, man.
Yeah, and it's just like, and they're good stories. You know what I mean? It's not as if it's just good, well-written stories and enjoyable to read. And you're like, bloody hell, I'm crap.
It takes me about like a week to knock out a short story. It takes me like 3 months to rough draft a novel. That's my standard. That's like what I've been managed to do. The rewrite usually takes me way longer because I just trudge my way through it. But yeah, I mean, the people who can jam stuff out, there are some authors like Jonathan Mayberry puts out, I think, almost like 4 books a year minimum, and they're all amazing. And I hate him, but I love him. But I hate him and love him. So he's at Dragon Con right now, and another reason to be jealous of the man. So yeah, but he's a beast, and I love his work, and he spans genres. Like, he's got the career that I'm gunning for.
Mm-hmm.
And he's one of those guys who worked in writing, who wrote for like 25, 30 years, and then hit a big break and won a Stoker, and then everything kind of blew up for him.
So big things, long game thinking, maybe just this world we're in now that everyone's expecting click of a button, instant gratification. Even though we've got the technology now, even though you can be seen more, still the actual process is the long game.
Yeah, it's definitely, you are a small business. As a writer, you're a small business, and as you grow, you're going to be working with other small businesses and partnering up with them. I'm partnered up right now with D&T because they're the ones publishing my book, Portrait.
I'm familiar. We've actually had quite a few people from D&T on the show.
Yeah, so
featured their works out there.
And
Dawn, I'm familiar. Great lady. Talked to her quite a bit.
Yeah, she's awesome. But D&T that's my current partner right now for Portrait. And maybe one day I will sell a book and I will get an agent, and that will be a business partnership. That now we are both partnered in my career, and we are both looking to make my small business of me and my brain profitable.
Because that's actually one of my questions. In today's creative world, you know what I mean? You've so many opportunities yourself, but how important is networking, collaboration? Because you do see in some writing groups, there is a level of snarkiness of everyone's competition, and they make themselves come across really unattractive as people.
Yeah, it's a bad writing group. I've been in writing groups like that. That's a bad writing group. A good writing group should be a handful of people, personally, in my opinion, 4 at most, especially if you're trying to be a working writer, because for everybody in the writing group, you have to read all their stuff. And the time I spend reading other people's stuff in a writing group versus how much time I spend writing my own stuff, it needs to balance out. I need to be able to juggle it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm working on a reading group, I read somebody's piece, whatever they send me, I'll read it 3 times before I go back to the writing group. So I'll spend, like, for maybe 10 pages, I'll spend a grand total of like 3 hours going over it and really picking it apart, so that when I go back to the writing, when I go back to my group, I can present them with an actual solid reply and rewrite and say, here are the things I think you might want to look at. I don't necessarily think you should change them because I may not be right, but here are my words, here's my response. A good writing group will just say it, take it and go, thank you, read it, and then disregard what they feel like they should disregard and accept what they feel like they should accept, but always consider it. That's a good group. I've had groups where people lost their minds and just straight up were like, you're being mean to me and you're destroying my soul. And I'm like, you have a brittle spirit. Welcome to publishing. I don't know what to tell you. I get rejected on a daily basis, and it is what it is. It's the job. So it's hard. It's really hard to find a group that you sync with, and that's unfortunate. But I've been to some writing workshops where people have to pay to get there. Are almost always, I'd say like 90% of the people there are there. They're professionally minded and they're there and they have the right mindset where you can just hammer away at their piece and they'll just nod and take it and then go back to their room and just make notes and decide whether or not they're going to listen to you.
Yeah, I've noticed the thing with the groups because because of this podcast, I'm a member of like over 100 groups, but that changes because I'll quickly, once I see snarkiness or people having to go at each other, it doesn't have to be directed at me. I just have to see it, and I'm out of that group because I don't want those sort of people involved with a show. I don't want to feature their work. I've no time for outright nastiness.
Yeah,
so I'm quick to leave a group. But I just find it strange with some of these groups, like hundreds of people, and there's a lot of people who've never written or don't intend to write, and they all seem to be the most vocal in these groups, and I find it very, very, very strange.
I think if you're a professional author, you need to be in a group with other professionally minded authors. If you're a professional writer in a group with people who are hobbyists, it's not, I don't think it's going to sync. I have yet to have that really, like, to have that sync up. The best groups I've ever been in.
Seems to be maybe the hobbyists that are the worst. I consider myself a hobbyist because I don't, you know what I mean?
I don't know if the hobbyists are the worst. It's just a different mindset. For like, if I critique a hobbyist piece, I'm critiquing it from a hopeful professional point of view where I'm really digging into it. And I'm digging into like everything, sentence construction, word choice, descriptions, everything. And when you hand it back and it's just covered in notations, a hobbyist is going to look at it and go, dear God, this is I must have written a piece of garbage. And it's like, well, no, it's just things I noticed. And some of them are typos and some of it is switch this word with this. And then some of them are just questions of things you might want to consider that character would probably be thinking about, and so on and so forth. You could literally take none of my suggestions and I'm not going to take it personal. I don't care. But a hobbyist who's like, oh, well, you've published, I must listen to you. I'm like, no, you really mustn't.
And that's what I've noticed. There seems to be this whole trying to build a hierarchy. And I think it's a destructive mindset. And if you're coming in new to this, and maybe not prepared for it, that's why I'm trying to highlight it, because it's there and it can be quite shocking.
Yeah.
Because there are people that love ripping others apart. They get a buzz out of it.
And that's horrible. Like, nobody should be that way. I hate when I have to like tear into a piece, because honestly, it's more work for me. I'm going to spend more time on that piece trying to pick out every little thing that I think's not working, rather than like, if I see a piece and I read it and I really like it and I can't find anything to talk about, I'm like, I have to spend so little time on this. That's amazing. I'm so happy right now because now I can go do my work. Versus I'm going to volunteer 4 hours of my day to really dive in on this and try to fix it up. So yeah, the people who love going after somebody, those people, you shouldn't even listen to them. Just ignore them, because now they're just looking for things to feel superior. And I'm like, that's not the point of a writing group. Writing group is we're trying to help one another get better.
Yeah, I think a lot of these
it's rough.
Groups are, like, it seems to be a thing with Facebook in particular, get as many people in as possible, because that's the measure of success. I've got 500 people in this group. And I've seen the drama in the early, not so much now because I kind of withdrew completely from it, but you'd see somebody maybe leave a group and then instantly try to destroy the group they were in by setting up a rival, and it's like a school playground.
Yeah. People
or
are
if an
nutty.
admin gets, argues with somebody, then they get thrown out of the group, and then all of a sudden they're on a campaign.
Yeah. I have a very strict no
To me, that's
drama policy.
wasted effort and
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Where you could be
anybody
creating
who gets,
something.
I've run into people who get like super defensive about their work, and I'm like, if you're going to be super defensive, why are you here? And I've seen people get really upset over just minor critiques. I've seen the whole, range and gamut of the stuff, and I'm like, and it's just it's discouraging when you're trying to just find a group that you can share your stories with, who will help you develop them slightly, who can help you maybe see some of the things you may not personally see because you're too close to the work. And it's a little frustrating when you're looking for those groups and you can't find them, and you run into all these different personalities. But that's also just how anything is. That's literally just going to a job. It's kind of why I don't go to a job, is I don't have to deal with other people. But finding a writing group is tricky, and you have to find the right balance for it. 100%. Oh no, he's getting kicked out again. One of the people in his writing group are watching, and they hacked the system.
Give me 3 red flags that people should look.
Haha. Is doomed. So, yeah, I don't know. Writing groups are rough. What else should you do?
Well, this has perfect connection all week. The time I'm actually having somebody on the chat, something messing me about.
It happens.
Oh God, man. Sorry, I was just saying, give me 3 red flags that people should look out for in one of these groups, or when they're dealing with someone, just that they should just know immediately, right? Nope, toxic. I'm not going to get any benefit.
Yeah. Oh, the 3 red flags.
3 red flags that you would see. When would you start recognizing? Oh, right, okay, I'm dealing with one of these type of people. I'm out.
Defensiveness, number 1, is a red flag. If somebody's super defensive and counter argues every little point you make, or if you say, hey, listen, while you're being critiqued, you can't talk, and that person just ignores that rule, that's a problem. That person's going to not ever listen. They're just going to be a drag on the group. Somebody who is hypercritical of everything, or has ever said the words, that X never works. Well, I could probably find an example of where X absolutely worked, and you can't make blanket statements like that. Blanket statements are generally pretty rough. And I think finally, anybody who takes it personal, if you can't compartmentalize your work and the critiques from your emotions, and this is not just a red flag, but this is just a really hard skill to develop as a writer. But if you can't do that, you probably don't want to get involved in a really professional level writing group. You want to stick to something that's really for people who are just doing it for fun. Do it in a hobby group.
So sorry.
That's okay. I just kept answering the question. Yeah, you want to stick to a hobby group. If you can't compartmentalize, stick to a hobby group, because anything that's professional level is just going to destroy your soul, because you're just not ready for that level of critique. So those would be
the same as horror. There's the kiddie pool. There's deeper waters. And then jumping into the diving pool.
Like we were talking about, there's the different grades of horror. There's the different levels of writing groups and what you're going to get out of it. Don't go into big writing groups. Big oversized writing groups are just not helpful, because if you go to a group that's like 20 people, there's just not enough time for everybody to read their stuff, and you're not gonna have the accountability to write every week. You're not gonna get feedback. And a lot of one of the other red flags in a writing group is that people show up unprepared. They haven't read the work. That drives me crazy. Show up prepared. I get occasionally being like, life got away from me, I didn't get to read everything. That I get occasionally. But if people are habitually showing up having not read what was submitted, that drives me up the wall.
No, it's good for people, I think, to know about this kind of stuff, the negatives as well as the positive, to be aware of it, because it's a big world, and it can be a nervous, daunting thing to stick your head above the parapet and put yourself out there.
Oh yeah. I
Like,
mean, when this book got accepted, I was like, woo. And as we got closer to publication gate, I was like, oh my God, this is terrifying. And now it's out. And I'm like, this is really scary. Like, I'm gonna see how this goes. So yeah, it's kind of wild. You're sitting there and you're waiting to hear what people have to say. And I'm very much trying to avoid looking at comments. Right now, I'm just trying to keep it. Right now, I'm just planning. I'm going to go to shows. I'm going to try to hand sell the book. Just going to do what I do, be a business person, work on my new book, just keep going.
You find you have to almost detach yourself from the work to be able to sell it?
Yeah, once you send it out. When I was doing the copy edits at the last minute, when I was doing like the final copy edits and approving that stuff, I was seeing lines in there, like out of the corner of my eye, but like, I rewrite that like constantly. Cause it's been almost 2 years since I think the last time I looked at it, like really seriously looked at it. And I went, I would rewrite so much of this because I've learned so much over the last 2 years. And I think that's something every writer goes through as they progress through their career. They look back on old work and go, I'd fix that. So, there's all types of stuff like that where you're always improving. And I think that's important, is to always be improving. So a lot of the lessons I learned from this past book, from Portrait, I'm applying to my new book, which oddly is a YA fantasy.
But yeah, the principle's the same. The tips and tricks are things that you've looked at before. That's part of the journey.
Yeah. It's like you learn. I think you learn a little bit from every book. The first book I wrote that didn't get published, I learned a lot from. I learned structure. I learned pacing. I learned how to do different dialogue and characters and everything like that. And then this book, I've learned how to really invest into emotion, how to build a scene, how to have a character take a book-long mental journey, and how to progress that in a very effective way. So now for this new book that I'm working on, it's a YA, I'm learning how to write not only a young adult book, but I'm learning how to have all of my characters, because now it's an ensemble book with multiple main characters, because it's fantasy, and I'm having them all take an emotional journey throughout the book. And I don't have just one POV character. Now I have 2 POV characters, and I'm moving my way through and learning how to pace that differently. So every time you try to like write a little bit more of a complex book. So like the complexity of my books have definitely grown, and my stories have grown as I write each new thing.
It's not going to be a love triangle, is there? There's not going to be a love triangle in this book.
In the the young adult book,
it seems to be YA's all love triangles. It's like, oh,
no, I joke. One of my best friends, Heather Straub, she writes romance, and we joke all the time that if I ever write a love scene in a book ever, I'm literally just gonna write, like, in parentheses, insert love scene here, send it to her, say write this, and I'm just gonna share the byline, because I'm like, this is not my wheelhouse. I don't write this. I no, and I just hand it off. I'm like, I run that kind of stuff by her constantly, because that is her strength. She nails that stuff. I am god awful at it.
How important is it to have that? Because some people don't seem to have that self-awareness of, okay, first of all, they don't own what they do well. Back to apologizing for being a horror writer because it's not high art. I've heard that, and I'm like, really?
You know what? Some of it isn't. Some of it is. It's
it's not meant to be. It's
not all of it is. Yeah, some of it's meant to be just.
But there's this obsession, I think, of being, the next classic literature creator, and it's like, calm down, and that's apologizing for being in the horror genre and enjoying it. I find very strange.
Yeah, no.
But there's also a self-awareness of what's not your wheelhouse, like you've mentioned, love scenes and that. You know what I mean? Recognizing what you're not good at, and not being afraid to ask for help.
You need to lean into your strengths. That's a huge thing in any sort of endeavor. For writing, I lean into dialogue. Dialogue tends to be where I am the strongest. And I think a lot of that comes from when I first started writing, I wanted to do comic books. So I studied comics. And I wanted to be a screenwriter. So I studied movies and screenwriting. So I learned dialogue like really, really well. So that's what I focus on. And now as I'm writing, I'm learning how to do other stuff. But that's still, I lean very hard into the dialogue aspect of stuff because that is one of the things I'm very good at. Like I know how to do that. And the other thing I lean hard into is story structure because I studied a lot of it and I kind of understand that as well. But yeah, love scenes and, that's hard. Like having my characters go on an emotional journey has been really difficult to learn. But it's something I've been building up over the last few years. And I think I nailed it pretty well in Portrait. And I'm hoping I'm going to nail it really well in the new book I'm working on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find it very difficult. See, internal politics and interactions. I'm more of an ideas guy. I love magic. I love like the higher ideas. I love entities. I love monsters and entities. People, because I scratch my head in real life with people going, "Why are you doing this, you lunatics?" What I mean? That's why social media as well is like a complete anathema. You're going, "Why are you getting on like it? Just don't." Or hate watching. That's a new phenomena that I just can't wrap my head around. I really hate this person, so I'm going to watch everything they do. And
that seems like such a waste of energy.
What the hell? But that's someone's genuine motivation, and I can't. My brain just can't wrap around how somebody can think like that to write it. You know what I mean? I can't understand it, so I can't write it because it's just like, what the hell?
Yeah.
And that'd be a good horror. You know what I mean? A hate watcher. I thought about that for a story, but when I was trying to write it, I'm like, I don't get it. I just can't.
Yeah, putting yourself in
I can't put myself in that person.
And it's weird because being a writer almost requires you to have a weird kind of empathy because you have to put your head. You got to put yourself into this random person's head that you may not necessarily agree with or even understand, but you've got to kind of see things from their point of view and try to figure it out. And it's rough. Sometimes it'll mesh up. I've actually compared it sometimes to like almost like method acting. Mm-hmm. Writing in its way when you're really getting into a character is kind of like method acting because you got to really get your head around the emotions and try to write it. And even sometimes add like maybe the physical responses. Like if you get really mad, your face gets really red and heated up. So you'll write that into a story because that's how that person gets mad. And I've known people who, when they get really mad, they cry. So then that is a different character. And that tells something about them who, when they cry, when they get mad and cry, that tells you a little bit about their personality. So there's a lot of like weirdness that you got to try to twist your brain around to figure out how to describe these very disparate characters that you're trying to build. And yeah, somebody who hate watches things, I imagine that they just love being right. And so they'll hate watch things, dissect it so that they have ammunition to prove how right they are and need that validation and need to be validated in some way. That's the kind of person I see doing that.
That's complete enough. I just don't get it. But to me, that's a fascinating story to be told of somebody who's like that, and take it to the extreme. Because most of these people hide behind a screen anyway. They just can't. If it comes face to face, they can't do it. But just that mindset that's a horror story in itself.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'll ever understand them the day I die. It's just bonkers.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah. It's people do some wild stuff. It's fun because I get to watch it and go, all right, I can put that in a book. Maybe if I can suss out the reason behind it, that could end up in a story. But yeah, people are a mystery to me as well. I just sit back and go, okay, guys, you do you. I'm gonna go read my book.
Yeah, I'm always the first. I'm out. So, what brought you into the horror genre in the first place? How did you get roped in?
Circumstances. When I was first starting to write, I started out, I became a big reader and writer because of Dragonlance, Margaret Weis, Tracy Hickman, Dragonlance. A friend of mine convinced me to read those books when I hated reading. And then I loved those books. I kept reading more Dragonlance. And then eventually I just started spreading out to everything over time.
I'll share my buddy Adams. He pops on the show from time to time. I'll share his channel with you. He has a whole channel dedicated to Dragonlance.
Oh, nice. He's probably having a field day with the new book then.
Just had 10K viewers.
Oh, geez.
Not so
Yeah,
long ago.
Dragonlance is huge. But yeah, and like it's
Yeah.
having a bit of a revival now because they got the new book out, Dragons of Deceit, and they've got a new and D&D Wizards of the Coast is putting out a new D&D rule book specifically set in Kryn for Dragonlance. So there's a big Dragonlance revival going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
But that was what got me started. And then over the years, I was writing little things here and there. I loved horror movies, like really hokey, all the real popular ones, Friday the 13th, yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street, all that stuff. So I wrote a couple I wrote like some fantasy stories and some weird horror stories growing up. Ended up going to Dragon Con, met a few people there, one of which was James Moore. And he introduced me to people. He introduced me to a convention in New England, Nikon, went to Nikon, met more people. And then that's where all of my opportunities started popping up. People were saying, hey, I've got this anthology that we're accepting for. And, oh, hey, I got this or I got that. And I would talk about my stories and they'd say, oh, that sounds really awesome. Send it to me. So I was like, okay. So I just started knowing people in the horror field and small press and indie in the horror industry. And it just kind of came from there of those were the opportunities I was running across. So those were the stories I started writing. And then that's just kind of how that came about. And I have other stuff I've done. I have a magical realism novel that is sitting on my hard drive that I need to go back and rewrite. And I'm working on this young adult thing that I started back in college that I'm finally getting to now. And the main reason being my kids have gotten older and they keep saying, hey, we want to read something that you've wrote. We want to read something you've written. I'm like, no.
And you're like, no.
Yeah, I'm like, absolutely not. So now I'm like, okay, I need to write something for my kids and their friends because they all want to read my stuff because they've read a couple of my short
A.A.
stories.
Milne got started. A.A. Milne?
Yeah.
The creator of Winnie the Pooh. Because funny enough, I covered the trailer last week, I think. But he was starting he was making up bedtime stories for his kids.
Yeah.
Not
so.
Son.
Yeah, so
was his son? Yeah, because that's where he based
Christopher Robin's based on his son. Yeah. But so that was the reason that my kids have read a couple of the short stories that were okay for them to read, and then and so yeah, they were like, we want to get a book from you. So last year, like over the whole summer, I wrote a whole new book, and it was the YA book, and I had my oldest kid read it as I was going, and they would give me back different responses and stuff and checklists and everything and tell me what they thought was going to happen. And then I would just keep going until the end of the book. And now I'm doing the rewrite to make it look professional and then hopefully sell it. And that's the map right there, actually, this is my reference map for the whole book.
All right. Hide the spoilers.
I don't care.
It's
a really poorly drawn map. It doesn't tell you anything. It's not telling you much. There's a swamp in the book. There's not much going on there. It was just so I could look at it and go, is that south? Yes, that was south from where they're walking. Okay, cool. And just go back.
I've notes here. I've really I handwrite stuff, and I've started handwriting in pencil because when you're trying to do it with a pen, and I sit in all weird places.
Yeah.
So if I write with ink, you never get in the right place. Start writing in pencil and trying to read back my own handwriting is disgraceful. And I've had this jot down notes with a current thing I'm working on. Okay, well, the travel to here. Okay, I need to keep track of this because as the story goes along, you're like, okay, well, where are they now? What if they want to go back to here?
Yeah,
really bloody difficult. I'm a terrible drawer. I'm shockingly bad.
That ain't much better.
So, the idea of trying to draw a map, like fantasy level map or for a book, it's just beyond me. But I'm not that stage yet.
Yeah, this is just reference. This is not if this book ever gets bought, they're going to have to hire someone to do a real good map because this map is garbage. This was just a reference note. I was like, I just need to reference things. I need to know when they split up and the path they take so I can get the timing right. That's it. And remember some of the names because I made some weird names for stuff. But yeah, I just tossed this thing together and was like, this will work.
Yeah, because it did that. That was a mistake apparently they've made with this Rings of Power, and they did it with Lord of the Rings as well. They didn't appreciate time to travel, and then you've got characters just popping up, going, "How the hell did you get from here to here when these guys have only arrived there?" And you're like,
Well, I think
That's,
the books in Lord of the Rings, the books, I thought he did a pretty good job in the books of having like the travel times.
oh yeah,
The
yeah, that was
movies were wild. Yeah, the movies were like just jumping. But I get that for pacing. It's a movie. It's like, eh. Some of that stuff is like, yeah, it's a movie. Because I was like just recently watching, I think I was watching Return of the King with my wife, and
mhm.
there was a scene where they just showed up at Isengard, and I'm like, I never realized how quickly they got from one point to the other, and they're not that close.
Yeah, it's like
I
okay, oh
was like,
well.
that's weird, but okay, whatever. It's a movie. I don't care.
Yeah,
I
it's like
still
three
enjoyed
chapters.
it.
The bit where Frodo and Sam are going from the top of the ravine to the bottom is like 3 chapters,
Yeah,
and they do it in like 2 scenes. It's like, oh, okay, right.
yeah. Well, Tolkien
But
definitely got a little out of hand at certain points in those books. Of like, all right, yeah, we get it. It's taking him a while, dude. Chill.
yeah, but it's important to keep track of.
Oh
I think
yeah.
that's that might be when it gets daunting. Do you think when you realize you have to start drawing maps, when you have to start taking plot points, is that when a project can maybe become overwhelming to somebody? How to get through it?
One step at a time, honestly. It's like you walk into a room and there's just garbage everywhere, and you're looking at it all and going, this is, I don't know. You just get overwhelmed and you don't know where to start, rather than just looking at your feet, picking up the first thing you see. Do I keep this? Do I throw it away? And then do it, and just go one word, one sentence, one paragraph, one page, one thing at a time until you get to the end. And if you take it in smaller chunks like that, it's far less overwhelming. When you start having to think about the big picture, yeah, it's easy to get overwhelmed. But like for this, I can point to, so like, let me see. So yeah, up north of here, where
Mm-hmm.
you can't see, my characters show up and start here, and that was the only thing I worried about when I was writing that section. But I knew that there would be like, oh, there's the normal city, that the first city they're going to go to. All right, well, I know the name of that. Put it over here. I'll worry about the details later. Then there's this, and I just kind of just said, okay, step one, step two, step three, got through it, had a really basic idea of what was going to happen, and then once I had all that locked in, I would start filling in the details here, filling in the details here when they got here, fill in, and just slowly filled in the details as I went until I got to a much more complete picture. And then I went back again and said, okay, now's the rewrite. Is there anything I need to add in? And I went and did the whole reread and just like marked things up and said, oh, you know what would be interesting? Add this here. You know what would be interesting? Add that there. And then go back and say, okay, type it all in. And that's what rewriting's for. So I think the smart thing to do is, if you're getting overwhelmed, draw yourself a really crude map, draw a line of the path, and then build like a small outline, and just say, at this location, this thing happened. This is who they met. Then they went to this location. Draw a little arrow at that location. This is who they meet. This is what happens. This is the story point that happens here. And then this is why. And then this is the reason they have to leave this location to this next location. And you just build a cause and event outline that forces your characters to move along the storyline. And then you write the book. And then you do your rewrites and you fix everything that doesn't work, or you add to it when you realize, oh, it would be really cool if I did this. Or, it would be really interesting for the overall theme of the book is if I add this in, and then you add it in and you fold it all in like you normally would, and you write as many drafts as you need to.
Of course, people associate maps with the fantasy genre, but there's no reason why it can't be used, even if you don't publish it,
Oh
for
yeah.
horror as well. Even buildings.
Yeah,
You know,
I've driven.
most
I have a floor. I had a floor plan for Portrait of a Nuclear Family, because it takes place mostly in a house,
mhm.
and I had a floor plan written out so that I knew how people were getting around, and I knew like the path people would have to take and through what rooms. That way, I never contradicted myself. I did that constantly. You have to, otherwise, because eagle-eyed readers are going to read it and go, that's weird. They just walked through a wall that used to not be there. And it's like, yeah, there are people who tried to build a floor plan for DuckTales, of Scrooge McDuck's mansion, and they were like, it's impossible. The mansion does not exist in the physical world. And I was like, why did you take your time to build a floor plan for that mansion? Like, why? Why were you so obsessed? Like, so I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna make a floor plan just so no one ever yells at me.
So you don't get accused.
I'm gonna knock this sucker out right now.
Yeah,
So,
I don't think from episode 8, I don't think it's that in depth. Card. Sure, they do it with like the old Transformers series, and they do it with He-Man. They try to build more on the characters than was actually originally intended.
yeah,
and that's why you get. I think part of the reason is, I mean, people are super protective of these sort of properties, hence why other folks who don't like these people know they can poke at them and get a rise.
yeah.
And they just set themselves up as a target, because then they just go, meh, I'm going to do this to your franchise and you're going to hate me for it, but you're going to give me lots of clicks and likes and views, and I'm going to make a fortune and you're going to be angry. And I'm like, okay. But with horror, it's like, oh, that was stupid. Yeah. It's like the other 20 stupid things I've read and watched.
Yeah, but then, but here's the thing. You don't want to be the horror author that transcends that moment where everybody reads it and then they take it super seriously and you didn't pay attention to those details. So it's like, it's that weird little, like, what happens if you become the person that people start focusing on that and you didn't take notice. So, because like in Portrait, there's nothing supernatural about it. It's very much like this could happen in the real world situation. And so I wanted to,
human.
Yeah, like it's like that was very much the greatest monsters are human monsters, and this is a very plausible, messed up story. So I wanted it to be as accurate as I could make it within the confines of what I needed to happen. And there were a couple times where like things came up where I went, oh crap, I need to fix that. Like I need to figure out how to get around that now. And a lot of it was police procedure and how. And like how long it takes to get search warrants and things like that. I was like, I'm gonna have to work that one out.
Yeah, there are some I've been watching. Like, I'm looking at things now with a critical eye, because I've only started this doing myself reviewing movies, because I'm forcing myself, because I want to look with that critical eye at the story. There's no point complaining about something or feeling despondent if you're not prepared to actually critically look and ask yourself, why don't I like something? Why do I like it? I mean, both questions are just as important. But yeah, you see, God, I can't remember the names of movies. I've gone through so many, but there's ones like Police Procedure. Even me not being in that field, you're just like, that doesn't make any sense. Why someone would just turn up and do this?
Yeah, it's suspension of disbelief. It's like, how important is that detail to the overall story, and who's really going to notice?
But by not having it, does it completely rip the person out?
Sometimes, yeah. It's weird. It's like, it's a balancing act. Sometimes you have to like add some of that stuff in and maybe ignore some of the finer details, but have enough of the broad strokes that people say, okay, yeah, they at least looked it up.
Yeah, you still need something to grip onto. It's that whole thing,
If you're writing a book that's about police procedure, you better have that stuff down and have those details. If the police are a subplot of the story, then you can kind of get away with a little bit more. So it's like one of those things, like figure out where the details are going to be and figure out what's super important to the story and get those details right. So there are sections of the book that I had to research a ton just to make sure I got the right terminology, got the right process, all of it. And then there's sections where I was like, I just have to do a little bit of cursory research just to make sure I know how this would go and the timeline it would take for it to happen. That was plausible. And then I kind of ran with that. So, I mean, that's what I'm loving having to write a fantasy, because now I don't have to care about any of that stuff. I can make it up. As long as I'm consistent, I just make it up.
There's still rules of, fantasy beards are the worst, especially if you start introducing magical systems. So people will go right down to, hold on a minute, you use that combination of rules for that spell, so it wouldn't work with that spell.
I cheated a lot in this. So,
stand by for that.
Leaving that door open to play around later. So, like right now in this, I made the world where, yes, magic exists, but only one group of people have access to it. And they've hoarded it all, and the world has no idea how magic works, so I don't have to worry about it right now. Maybe in the next one.
You're like, I'm not ready for that yet. I'm not ready.
Yeah, I was like, no, I'm not. There's just too much. I'm like, I was building the world, and that took enough of a word count that if I had to add the magic system in, I would have blown it up. So I was like, you know, what would be more fun to just make it so that magic has kind of wrecked the world, but now no one has access to it anymore to fix it, except for the bad guy. The
Mhm.
bad guy is the only person who actually has access to the magic. And the only reason is to defend them. They don't really use it. They just want to make sure no one can use it against them, so they hoard it. So
No,
that
no.
was kind of like my cheat. But then I do have a plan on how the magic's going to work, which I'll deal with if I get a sequel. I'll do in the sequel.
Yeah, just have that. Yeah, just in the back of your mind.
Yeah,
Are you okay for time? Because we've kind of normally schedule these things for an hour, but
I'm good.
yep, kind of covered. Kind of covered most of the sort of topic. Like I said, I go loosely with sort of topics. It's just more to give people a chance, get to know you and thought process. And this is geared towards people that maybe have just started out creating or thinking about starting. And I'm of the mind that we need more creators than ever now, because
Yeah.
we're seeing what's happening. We're seeing the fast food chain restaurant mentality taking the.
I think we need more creators, but we also need people who are going to consume said creations. Um, Book sales are not, it's like and this is, I think, just, history shows you this. First it was the radio, then it was television, and every time technology has amped up a little bit, books have suffered because they are the oldest of the
Mhm.
entertainment sections of the entertainment channels that you can tap into. And so I think people, there's a lot of hate. There's a lot of like people just don't want to spend the time investment to read a book. And I get that to a degree. Because I mean, it takes less time to watch one season of Game of Thrones than it does to read the first book of Game of Thrones.
Mhm.
It takes less time to watch that season than it does to listen to the audiobook. The audiobook is enormous. And I think that's one of the things is people are not putting the time or are incapable of putting the time into reading and watching those things, that it's hurting the demand for one of writing and for stories, and it's hurting the ability for people for new stories and new ideas to come out. There's a lot going on in it, and then there's like the big pushes to get rid of public domain and to keep things out of the public domain, and the argument of like how long can something be locked into an estate before it can go into the public domain. There's debates about that often, but and there's just so much weirdness involved that it gets muddy and it gets really complicated, and ultimately it really comes down to is we need to get people to read. People need to read more books. People need to. I think people need to stop watching reality television. Hey, there's somebody here.
Oh God, that was the death of entertainment.
If I
So
were, hmm?
as a final thought, then obviously if you've got people arriving and stuff,
No,
how
no,
does
no.
a
I
writer
saw
need
somebody
to?
show up in the comment section.
Oh, the comments. Sorry. Oh, that's just seen it now. So, sorry, I'm a bit delayed. Yep. Oh, Stephen Nozak. All right, brother. If you were to start over, would you do books or screenplay?
You mean all right? So I'm going to try to answer that in multiple ways. Do you mean in terms of like would I try to do screenplays as part of my learning experience, or would I have started out trying to write books first? Because I did start out
So,
writing screenplays and comics.
so maybe he's thinking, you're saying the demand for books, and maybe it goes into my sort of question of how to evolve. Is maybe screenplay is a better option for new writers as opposed to novels,
I
or is
think
it?
I don't know that there's a better option. I would say if you're going to start out with short stories. They teach you a lot about form, about economy of language, and then switch over to books. Screenplays are a little rough because the screenplay industry, you're going to spend a ton of time writing spec screenplays. Sometimes if you're doing television shows, you're going to write like a spec screenplay for a television show or teleplay that is like, say you're writing an episode of, let's say it's Game of Thrones, and you submit it to them because you want to write scripts for them. You're never going to sell that. The point of that script is to get to show them that you're capable of writing it, not necessarily that they're going to buy that one. And then if they like it, you get to pitch ideas and you might get bought. And it's weird. It's a really, really tough industry. And for all the rejections you get as like a short story or book writer, the rejection numbers on screenplays and teleplays are way higher. And that's a little rough. So I don't think you should really choose one or the other. I think it's good to do both and learn both, because you may write a book and then somebody will say, hey, we want to turn it into a movie or a series. And you say, hey, well, could I maybe write some of the scripts or help with that? And then
more options if you stick to the
original story.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's just an avenue of for your career, for your business. Now you're writing books and you're writing screenplays. If you get good at writing screenplays, you might have somebody offer you new opportunities and new jobs, and you go, cool, I'll do that while I'm writing my book. Because like we said, books take a really long time to produce. And in the meantime, you got to pay the bills. So let's write some screenplays too. And let's have multiple avenues, multiple revenue streams coming in from various different concepts. So especially as a creator, you should be open to writing all of it. But the thing I would start with is short stories. You can read a lot of them very quickly. I read a short story daily, every day. Every morning I read one short story. And you can write a short story in a week. And Ray Bradbury famously challenged, you can't write 52 bad short stories in a row. So if you write one short story a week every week, by the end of the year, he was like, at least one of them will be sellable. So if Ray Bradbury's saying you should start out with short stories, I would run with what he's saying. I would agree with that, man.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. So final question,
Sure.
Final thought, just to close this out. How do we get more people reading again? How do we bring people back into the fold? How do we make books sexy again?
That's a really good question. I don't know. Like, my oldest kid loves to read. We got him into reading because I used to read to him at night. I was picking up young adult books that I loved or I'd always wanted to read, and I'd go to bed and I'd read a chapter a night to him every night, and I read with my kids. Eventually, he started picking up other books and reading on his own, and we just kept throwing books at him and trying new stuff constantly and getting him to read more things. My youngest child doesn't necessarily like reading, but he loves to be read too. So again, we read to him, and he does have a love of story. Mm-hmm. I think the big challenge is to get people to love story and get people away from watching drama and reality television. Because reality television is kind of just drama, but there's no substance to it. Versus, I don't mind watching a drama like This Is Us is a dramatic show, and there's a lot of drama to it. And while it's not necessarily my cup of tea, there is a lot in there that people really get out of it and take away from it. And there's a lot of emotional catharsis to it that you're not going to get from a lot of the reality television shows, like, Keeping Up with the Kardashians. So I think there's we need to.
I have yet to watch an episode a lot. I've no interest in it. If I go through life never seeing an episode.
Of which?
That Kardashian thing.
Oh, yeah. No, I've seen clips, obviously, because of the internet, but
I think people are starting to read more since Hollywood just continues to remake everything. I think great TV shows and movies moved us away for a while, but we're coming back.
I hope so.
It'd be nice because we've just seen people degenerate. We've even seen the likes of YouTube move to shorts and reels. That things have to be less than a minute. People don't even have the attention span to watch a 3-minute video. It has to be less than a minute now, and that was the direction we're heading on. And
well, yeah, YouTube,
it can be learned again. People can learn that skill. People can learn to run, do physical stuff. People can learn to read. Personally, I hope, I'm just trying to figure out how how do we encourage folks? That's why we have this as well, another avenue for people to, if you get to know an author, you might want to read them more than it just being a name on a page. You know what I mean, there's
Yeah.
a 100% difference between
Also,
speaking to somebody.
I also think we should make audiobooks way more affordable. I know it's hard to do because to produce an audiobook is crazy expensive.
Voice actors charge
It's a lot. It's like
a couple
$250, $300 an hour at the bottom end.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, listen, I get it. You got to pay the artist for the work, and voice acting, doing it well is not easy. It's just, and some authors can do their own voice work. I can't for this book because it's from a woman's point of view, and I think that would just be weird. Me reading the book from a woman's point of view, from a mother's point of view. I'd rather get a woman to do the audiobook for just verisimilitude. But but yeah, so but I think if there's a bit of a, sometimes people look down on people who listen to audiobooks. And I have no problem with that. If you're listening to an audiobook, you're reading. As far as I'm concerned, that's perfect.
You're concentrating, you're taking the time.
Yeah,
we've had this discussion many times. I'm sick of that attitude of this is the right way. That's where I was alluding, you know, the whole snarkiness and that attitude and what to look out for.
Yeah.
You can only be an author if you're self-published, or sorry, if you're traditionally published. You can only be if you've done this. You can only be if you've done that. And I want to, and that's why I was asking about people getting overwhelmed, because there's this attitude and this elitism.
Yeah.
And
I've got my personal preferences, but I don't.
Everybody does.
Right. I don't push them on other people. I personally, it was important to me to go through a publisher. It's important to me to buy a book rather than audiobook. Audiobook thing is because I can't focus. I can't pay attention. I zone out if I'm listening to an audiobook. I just can't help it. It's just who I am. It's just, that's it. I'm much better with a written word in my face. But yeah, whether you go self-published, whether you do traditional, all of that, who cares? If your book is quality and it goes out and people like it, that's all that matters. In the end, that's what the takeaway is. That's what you should be worrying about.
Fantastic. I think that's a great note to finish up, or else we'll be here for 3 hours. Because I know once not time waste either. It's really enjoyable talking to you, but I don't want you here all night. You know,
dude, I'm welcome. You can call me up, tell me to come back anytime. I'll come on.
Absolutely. This isn't a one-shot deal. I've some returning authors. Next couple of weeks as well have been on. You know, that's what we're here for. You're always welcome to my show. You're always welcome to take part with more material. That's what we're here. That's just an avenue to try and bring people back in the fold again and get creativity out there again. You don't always have to go to a fast food chain. You can go to a restaurant. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to come back and even talking about like workshops, because this past summer I did the Yale Writers Workshop, which is very literary.
I want to get a couple of people on. Another thing I want to start experimenting with is having multiple people on and cover a topic.
Yeah, definitely.
So we can obviously talk about that, and I'm going to share that link with you as well. We'll close out. But everyone here, thanks for taking part. Thanks for the comments. Check out JP and his work. Links are in the description. Check out the channel. We featured a little snippet of Portrait of a Nuclear Family.
Yes.
Dropped yesterday. Check that out and definitely buy the book. And please. Just finally,
is now available in physical copies on Amazon. That finally happened yesterday, which I'm super excited about.
Fantastic, because it's always good to have the options. But
yeah.
Yep. Thanks very much, folks. And until next time, keep it creepy, keep it horrific.
See you later, guys.